Good evening. My name is Nan Schichtel. I am the Secretary of the Grand Rapids Historical Society. I want to welcome you to our April 2022 meeting. We're very excited tonight to have a new to us speaker, DanaKennethJohnson, and he will be speaking on the Kent County's Lost and Forgotten Places. And I will give you an introduction of Mr. Johnson, but before I do, I wanted to mention that next month, May 12th, we'll have our part 2 of a program. Gina, jump in if you can. It is about the churches in Grand Rapids, and it will be on the west side of the river. It will be part 2. Part 1 was shown last month, and I'll have more information about that a little bit later, but it was a great program, as is this one really looks interesting. And just so you know, our programs, most of them are going to be posted onto the Grand Rapids Historical Society's YouTube. And some of them are just there for a short period of time, depending on what the presenter allows us to do. So if you have friends who could not be with us this evening to watch Dana and listen to him, know that in a few days we will have this program up on our YouTube channel. Okay, then I would like to start and actually get the program going. This is going to be so cool. DanaKennethJohnson is our speaker tonight, and he's a photojournalist, a historian, an author, a tremendous number of books that he's written, and I'll let you know what some of those are. Editor, publisher, educational media producer, audiovisual specialist, lecturer, and he has written many books. They're available on Amazon. There is the Michigan Pioneer series, which includes the 1864 Diary of Stephen Staines, a year in the life of a Michigan pioneer, the 1883 Diary of Captain Robert Walter Hoy, a year in the life of a Fenwick, Michigan pioneer, the 1879 Diary of Adelbert Worden, 19th century Michigan diaries, and the 1881 Diary of Sophronia Agatha Burney Frere. And that is one of his relatives. He also has written and had published in a Forgotten Michigan series, a book, Kent County, Lost Towns, Abandoned Sites, and Forgotten History, Forgotten Towns in Montcalm County, Ionia County, Lost and Forgotten Towns and Sites, and Newaygo County, Michigan, Lost and Forgotten Towns and Sites. And he has a very long list of an old school project, historic schools of all these different counties, including Ionia, Montcalm, Barry, Muskegon, Kent County, Ottawa County, Oceana, Gratiot County, Marquette County, Alger County, and Mason County. So he obviously travels. He's done a lot of research, and we're so happy to have him here this evening. And Dana, I am going to hand it off to you and just first say thank you for coming tonight.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for everyone who's participating in this. As you can see, my name is DanaKennethJohnson. I'm a native Yooper, currently living northeast of Grand Rapids, about a 45-minute drive, just so you know. We will begin our program now, if it works. There we go. Now, as these two maps illustrate, Kent County has the distinction of having 10 municipalities. There's Cedar Springs, Rockford, Grand Rapids, East Grand Rapids, Walker, Granville, which is actually in the next county in Ottawa County, East Grand Rapids.
Oh, that's us.
Oh, I went to Granville, Wyoming, Kentwood, Lowell, and Caledonia, that are geopolitically separate from its 24 townships of Tyrone, Sparta, Alpine, Walker, Wyoming, Byron, Solon, I don't know how to pronounce that exactly, Algoma, Plainfield, Grand Rapids, Paris, Gaines, Nelson, Cortland, Cannon, Ada, Cascade, Caledonia, Spencer, Oakfield, Grattan, Vergennes, Lowell, and Bound. Now you notice I read those off in geographical order rather than alphabetical. That's because that's how we're going to go through this series as far as we can get. So we begin with the town named Gooding in Sparta Township. People started settling near the corner of 13 Mile and Kenowa Avenue in Sparta Township, and also stretching it over into Chester Township in Ottawa County, beginning around 1887. When the Toledo, Saginaw, and Milwaukee Railroad laid track through Chester Township, Ottawa County, on November 19th, 1888, Gooding was given a post office with storekeeper Richard J. Gooding, that's the name of the town, as its first postmaster. Post office was then transferred to Ottawa County on June 5th, 1918, where it continued to operate until January 31st, 1923. At one time, the community of Gooding boasted the following businesses: a blacksmith shop, boarding house, canning company, creamery, depot, grocery store, and a hardware and implement store. The post office closed January 31st, 1923, and the rail line was abandoned and the track removed in 1940. Most of the store buildings and residents have been removed over the years. Currently, there is a resurgence of commercial businesses along the north side of Gooding from Kenowa west into, that's Kenowa Avenue, I believe, west into Ottawa County. We move farther south along the county line to Lisbon. In 1845, John Pittler and his family blazed a trail through the wilderness and arrived at the site of what was to become the village of Lisbon. Curtis A. Pittler, son of John, was the first European male born there on November 3rd, 1847. In 1846, using John Pittler's homestead as a starting point, Samuel Free and John Brooks began a survey for a public road between Newaygo to the north and Grand Rapids to the south. Mr. Pittler assisted in his locality with the felling of trees and clearing of brush in preparation for the construction of the road. Mr. Pittler ran an inn at this location for 3 years. The village of Lisbon, originally called Pittler's Corners, developed in the area of John Pittler's original homestead, located around the intersection of 12 Mile Road and that would be Coolidge in Ottawa County, and Kenowa Avenue, which is the county line. Like Gooding, Lisbon was in both Sparta Township in Kent County and Chester Township, Ottawa County. Chester Township's first post office was established at Pittler's Corners, December 21st, 1847. John Pittler became the first postmaster. A few years later, a relay station was established for the Grand Rapids and Big Rapids coach lines, the horse-drawn stagecoach, where people could transfer to the Muskegon line. The name of the community and the post office were changed to Lisbon on November 21st, 1859, when it became an incorporated village. Lisbon was the only incorporated village in Chester Township, and in 1904 an election was held and it was decided to vacate the village's charter. By enlarging the top portion of this 1912 village plat map, we can better see where the schoolhouse, store, and church used to be. The two-story frame Lisbon School was built in 1871 at a cost of $2,700. At one time, it housed 150 students and 3 teachers. That's a handful for those teachers. A Methodist church was built in 1864, and a Baptist church was built a short time later. The Masonic Temple at 20591 Kenowa Avenue Northwest is Lisbon's only remaining historic building. Fruit Ridge Center, Ballard's Corners, and Englishville were all villages along what is now a 10-mile road between Sparta Township and Alpine Township. And these modern maps are from the 2017 third edition Michigan County Atlas, subtitled Backroads and Forgotten Places. The next edition was subtitled Backroads and Unforgettable Places. That's from Universal Map by the Kappa Map Group. And last I heard, that atlas is out of print. So if you can find a copy, get it. The Fruit Ridge Center was located at the intersection of 10 Mile Road and Fruit Ridge Avenue on the border between Sparta and Alpine Townships. No history has been found to determine when Fruit Ridge Center became a town or when it ceased operating as one. That doesn't mean the locale lacks enterprise. The site is home to Peach Ridge Orchard Supply Incorporated, and in the middle of the orchard country, it could hardly be in a better location. We next move to Ballard, also known as Ballard's Corners, which stood at the intersection of 10 Mile Road and Sparta Avenue. As illustrated on this 1876 map, Ballard was named after local landowners L.S. Ballard and S.H. Ballard. Ezra Brown served as first postmaster beginning on February 26, 1889. Post office closed on September 30th, 1903. I should mention most of the information regarding these towns and their post offices comes from a 1973 book by Walter Romig called Michigan Place Names. It is still available on Amazon.com, and it has become my Bible of sorts for finding places in Michigan. That combined with the Michigan County Atlas, and you can find anything anywhere in Michigan for the most part. At any rate, 8 years later in July, I need to read that one I was just on because I forgot to tell you about this. The Google Street View photo taken August 2011 shows an old commercial building. Looks like it was last converted to a home on the northeast corner of 10 Mile Road and Sparta Avenue. 8 years later, in July 2019, the old building is no longer standing and is actually spillover parking for the church next door across the road. That would be this church, the Ballard Church of Christ, remains standing and in operation on the northwest corner. This 1894 enhanced composite map highlights the properties of Richard S. English in Sparta Township and E. English in Alpine Township. Englishville was first settled in 1845 and named for landowner Joseph S. English. Its schoolhouse was built in 1852, at least its first schoolhouse. It's had several replacements since then. And it was given a post office on July 29th, 1856, with Richard S. English as its first postmaster. The church on the northwest corner of 10 Mile and Vinton Avenue is still standing. And there it is. Originally built as a Congregational Episcopal Church, Englishville's New Hope Holiness Church appears on maps as early as 1894. Several schoolhouses, as I mentioned, have stood on this site on the west side of Vinton Avenue, south of 10 Mile Road, since the first one was built here in 1856. The current one last served as Englishville High School, closed in 2014, and now stands relatively vacant. Here's by the looks of it, though, it's used for occasional community gatherings. You can learn more about historic schools of Michigan on my course on historic schools of Michigan of the various counties, which were previously mentioned. One feature of Englishville that still stands is the Bow Tie Tavern, a fixture on the southeast corner of 10 Mile Road and Alpine Avenue for many decades. Jack and Mary Kaiser purchased the business in 1980. Mary Steinbrecher, the current owner, purchased the tavern from her parents in June 1990. Tracks passing through Englishville have a history of their own. Grand Rapids, Newaygo and Lakeshore Railroad, chartered on September 11th, 1869, operated a 46-mile line between Grand Rapids and White Cloud between 1872 and 1881. September 30th, 1881, it consolidated with other companies to form the Chicago and West Michigan Railroad. The Pere Marquette Railroad was incorporated on November 1st, 1899, and began operation on January 1st, 1900, absorbing several railroad companies. The Pere Marquette was reincorporated on March 12, 1917 as the Pere Marquette Railway. And in the 1920s, the Pere Marquette came under the control of Cleveland financiers Horace and Mantis and Swearingen. These brothers also controlled the New York, Chicago, and St. Louis Railroad, the Erie Railroad, and the chess horse entitled When Rails Ruled. That's going to be offered at several places, and possibly, who knows, Grand Rapids Library might pick up on that presentation as well. We'll talk about that later. Alpine was the station and post office was first settled in 1837 by Solomon Wright, his wife, and 5 sons. The township was organized 10 years later in 1847 and named for the abundance of pines at the time. The village was given a station on the Grand Rapids and Newaygo Railroad, and on January 14th, 1862, a post office with Egbert B. Hill as its first postmaster. The post office continued to operate until February 16th, 1880. So just 18 years, but it was reopened May 17th, 1880, and remained in operation until January 15th, 1937. Alpine now exists as a mostly industrial area along the CSS tracks north of Comstock Park. The town of Pleasant appears on this 2017 atlas at the intersection of 8 Mile Road and Stage Avenue. This 1876 map depicts Pleasant Post Office near the top of Section 18 in Alpine Township and an 1/8 mile south of the intersection. As quoted from the 1870 History and Directory of Kent County, Michigan, every acre added to the cleared space adds more than its proportionate amount of pleasure to the soul of the laborer. So the settlers of this hamlet named it Pleasant. John Coffey served as the first postmaster beginning December 30th, 1847. The post office continued operation until July 13th, 1889, which calculates to about 22 years in service before the town of Pleasant pretty much died. These days, Pleasant is a farming community surrounding the rural intersection of a few miles northwest of Grand Rapids. From the ground, Pleasant is virtually indistinguishable from the surrounding landscape. We must go back to 1876 on this corresponding map to find a town called Brick Tavern. Walter Romig's Michigan place names describes Brick Tavern as having had a post office inside the tavern, with its proprietor Edward P. Camp assigned as its first postmaster beginning on June 26, 1874, with the post office operating until June 24th, 1878. So just 4 years. The Brick Tavern still stands at 4481 Fruit Ridge Avenue. The real estate website Zillow.com confirms that the 3,221 square foot single-family home, as it is now, is a 4-bedroom, 3-bath property built in 1862. It last sold on August 27th, 2021 for $410,000. Wonderful thing about the recent realty sales is that you can find photos of the interior of this building, of which I have several. Here are just a few of the 38 interior photos from realtor.com. And it shows you that some of the interior is new, and like that big open fireplace, obviously it's kept some of its original elements. There's a very narrow dining room. It was given a post office name on October 7th, 1862, with Peter G. Foote as its first postmaster. The post office closed on December 16th, 1879, but reopened from March 17th, 1894, until closing for good September 30th, 1903. A visit these days to Scudderville, or North Byron, is just a curve in the road where 64th Street crosses the old railroad bed, which is now part of Kent Trails. I did find this lovely home still standing as a subtle reminder of Scudderville's past. The name of this town alone made it worth talking about. It could be pronounced Debris. It could be pronounced Debris. In either case, you can see the green highlighted patch of land owned by P. Debris, the town's namesake. The village stood on the border between Kent and Ottawa counties, but since it only had a post office for 8 years, from November 1893 till October 1901, I found no historical map that includes the village. According to Romig's book, its first postmaster was storekeeper William D. Struik, S-T-R-U-I-K. This is Debris as it appears today. Oh, look, new construction, but no old building standing. There's another view. As you can see, debris or debris is essentially no longer there. This 1894 map shows North Door Post Office, located on the southeast corner of 108th Street and Wilson Avenue, which is 22nd Street in Allegan County. The village began as a farming community circa 1865, named for its location on the northern edge of Dorr Township in Allegan County. It was believed to have been named for Thomas Wilson Dorr, principal in Dorr's Rebellion, where the Rhode Islander took up arms against his state to force repeal of the law that refused the franchise to anyone who didn't own at least $134 worth of real estate. North Dorr's first postmaster, Philip Endres, E-N-D-R-E-S, took his post on March 19th, 1874. Post office operated until September 30th, 1905. This was National Hotel in North Dorr, run by John Thomas, shortly after being completed in 1894. You can see the construction materials still laying around beside the building. North Dorr residents take pride in their heritage. North Dorr General Store has stood in the same location since 1863. That's 159 years. This photo of the store was taken in 1865, just after the end of the Civil War. Note the uniformed Union soldier at far left. They're very proud of that picture, and I can see why. While offering modern convenience foods, North Dorr General Store retains its 19th century charm. St. Mary's Catholic Church once stood next to the cemetery in North Dorr. This vintage photo shows the chancel. Recently torn down, the site of the church is now a bare patch of land between St. Mary's Visitation Center and the cemetery. Keeping a look at the time, we still have a half hour to go, so we have plenty of time to get through some more of this material. Solon Township has two distinctions. It has just one town, Solon Center, unless you count the west half of Cedar Springs. And it also contains the highest point in Kent County, Fisk Knob, at 1,063 feet above sea level. Fisk Knob is not only a Kent County park, but at 15 to 20 feet above the surrounding landscape, it's an easy hike and a great place to play King of the Hill. You used to be able to drive your car to the top, but now you have to walk up the gated road or straight up the east side if your knees don't give out. The summit provides a surprisingly great view of the surrounding landscape. A U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey reference mark has been installed in concrete at the top of Fisk Knob, and it is a federal offense to disturb that marker, so leave it alone. Solon Center at the intersection of 19 Mile Road and Algoma Avenue doesn't appear as such on any map other than in the Michigan County Atlas. I need to go back to that slide for a moment because you'll notice it is also home to the town hall for the Solon Township Fire Hall. Is an older building, and on the north side of 19 Mile west of Algoma Avenue. Here are a few of the houses at Solon Center of varying ages. And this barn that looks at one time to have been a residence. Now about the river that runs through it. This 1894 Algoma Township map doesn't show the village of Algoma, even though the history records history records that it had a post office until 1899. Freeman J. Comstock became the first postmaster of Algoma on October 25th, 1856. The post office operated until August 14th, 1858. Reopened from October 1858 until May 1860, and again from November 1896 until November 1899. Note that the Rogue River on this 1894 map, I had a false cue, is labeled the Rouge River, which in fact is what it was originally named. An article in the Rogue River Watershed Project newsletter, Riffles and Runs, published by Grand Valley State University, reported that a topographer named James A. Morrison named the Rogue River after the Rouge River in the southeastern side of the state. After recording the new name for the river, it was misspelled as the Rogue. Even today, the confusion still exists between the Rogue and the Rouge River. A station on the Grand Rapids and Indiana Railroad, Birchville, was platted in 1868 by John S. Weller of Ann Arbor and named for his partner Jefferson Birch, who had built the first steam sawmill here in 1866. The steam sawmills were unique because generally sawmills were powered by creating a mill pond and running the water through a sluice to power a water wheel. So with a steam generated sawmill, you can imagine the advantages and disadvantages. The post office named Birch's opened November 20th, 1868 with Earl K. Childs as its first postmaster. The post office continued operation until September 8th, 1879, and the depot was named Birch, or as this 1876 map indicates, Birch's Station. By 1907, when this map was published, all that was left of Birchville is a 20-acre parcel owned by Mr. M. Birch. 2017 Michigan County Atlas map shows Birchville along the tracks in section 12, quarter mile south of Indian Lakes Road and east of White Creek Avenue. From the street, Birchville is now just a lost locale along the White Pine State Park Trail, which is a 192-mile long pathway from Comstock Park to Cadillac. There is this distinctive house on the west side of the trail. The Google photo is from 2013. This next Google photo is 6 years later, and it shows that the house is now obscured by maturing pines. A few other houses exist in the vicinity, but there is no sign of Birchville as such anywhere. Such is not the case with the historic community of Edgerton. Andrew House, note Mrs. House's property highlighted in green, platted the village of Edgerton when the Grand Rapids and Indiana Railroad came through and built a station here. And Mr. Edgerton became, I'm sorry, who am I talking about? Mr. House, Andrew House became its first postmaster. January 25th, 1869. The post office operated until April 15th, 1937. The poetess, Julia A. Moore, dubbed the Sweet Singer of Michigan, was a pioneer storekeeper here. Edgerton's, note 39-acre parcel highlighted in yellow, were early settlers and landowners in the area. The village of Edgerton was also known as Port Hollow. Julia Ann Moore, born Julia Ann Davis, was an American poetaster. She's famed chiefly for writing notoriously bad poetry. You can see the Wikipedia definition of a poetaster, like a rhymester or a versifier. It's a derogatory term applied to bad or inferior poets. Specifically, poetaster has implications of unwarranted pretensions to artistic value. The word was coined in Latin by Erasmus in 1521. This particular poem she wrote was inspired by the Chicago Fire. The Great Chicago Fire, friends, will never be forgot. In the history of Chicago, it will remain a darkened spot. It was a dreadful, horrid sight to see that city in flames, but no human aid could save it, for all skill was tried in vain. I don't know, it doesn't seem that bad to me. Another one she wrote, and this is a less morbid one dealing with temperance. Many a man joined the club that never drank at Rockham. Those noble men were kind and brave. They care not for the slang they meet on every side. You're a reformed drunkard too. You joined the Red Ribbon Brigade among the drunkard crew. Okay, that one is a little bit cheesier or bad. Despite her acknowledgement that literary is a work very difficult to do, she did not approve of the life of Byron. She wrote about him, the character of Lord Byron was of low degree, caused by his reckless conduct and bad company. He sprung from an ancient house, noble but poor indeed. His career on earth was marred by his own misdeeds. Now, it's interesting that Mark Twain was a self-described fan of Moore, though not for the reasons Moore would have liked. Twain, in fact, alluded to her work in his dissertation book story called Following the Equator, and it is widely assumed that Moore served as a literary model for the character of Emmeline Grangerford in Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Mark Twain wrote of in her style, Grangerford's funereal ode to Stephen Dowling. Oh, this was Mark Twain's Grangerford's funereal ode to Stephen Dowling Potts. Let's see if I can read this poem without screwing it up. Oh no, then list with tearful eye, whilst I his fate do tell. His soul did from this cold world fly by falling down a well. They got him out and emptied him. Alas, it was too late. His spirit was gone for to sport aloft in the realms of the good and great. So I think Mark Twain had a tongue-in-cheek appreciation for poetry. At any rate, Moore has been grouped into the Western Michigan School of Bad Verse Makers, and since 1994, the Flint Public Library has held the Julia A. Moore Poetry Festival to celebrate bad poetry. Here's a list of her contemporaries. Now, the most historic thing about Edgerton is its railroad culvert, unless you count Julia. A historical marker declared that the Grand Rapids and Indiana Railroad, the GR&I, reached Algoma Township in 1867. A series of wooden trestles were built to cross Wicked Creek, which was later named Stegman Creek. In 1885, after repeated fires and floods, the GR&I hired James House to cut field stones from the farm and build this culvert to stabilize the trestle. Eventually, the GR&I abandoned the trestle and buried it intact within a wall of dirt above the culvert. It has been since uncovered and restored to its former glory, and is now part of the 192-mile-long White Pine Linear State Park Trail. No historic drive through Algoma Township is complete without a visit to the Pine Island Drive Bridge. The historical marker informs that the Pine Island Drive Bridge is a rare Michigan example of a reinforced concrete rainbow arch bridge. A type of through arch design, this bridge built between 1922 and 1924 replaced a steel truss bridge. Low river banks at the crossing of the Rogue River required supporting trusses to be raised above the bed of the 100-foot span, giving the bridge its unusual form. Designed by Michigan State Highway Department bridge engineer Charles Mellett, PE, I presume that stands for some sort of engineer, and constructed by Zealand contractor Peter Brill, it was described at the time as beautiful in line and built by a master bridge engineer. We next move to Plainfield Township. This 1894 maps identifies Childsville, Childs Mills, Belmont, which is of course not a ghost town, Austerlitz, Plainfield. Also, well, I don't know if that's considered a ghost town or not, because there is no real town of Plainfield as such, just a township. And there was also Mill Creek or Mill Creek Station, which is, as I mentioned before, I think is now Comstock Park, also not a ghost town. Now, Austerlitz was located on what is now West River Drive on the north bank of the Grand River, just west of Wolverine Avenue, which is more commonly known as the Beltline. Austerlitz was first settled by Andrew Watson in 1837. It was the site of and was known as Imperial Mills, according to the information I have, although you'll find out soon there's some discrepancies here. At any rate, Imperial Mills was a large flouring mill located at the junction of the Grand and Rouge Rivers, but the mill burned down in 1876. Austerlitz was given a post office on January 30th, 1841, with Zenas G. Windsor as its first postmaster. The post office was renamed Imperial Mills on November 5th, 1874, and operated as such until September 30th, 1910. The site was also known as Buena Vista. The historical marker in front of the Heiser Rivers Museum tells a slightly different story. Plainfield was first settled in 1838 as post office known as the Austerlitz office, because there was a Plainfield post office elsewhere, was established in 1843. It was later housed in this structure for a short time. We'll see that structure in a minute. At first, mail came by horse, but in 1848, it began coming by stagecoach, and by 1876 by rail by a nearby Belmont. In the days before envelopes, letters were folded and closed by sealing wax and other means. The Austerlitz post office operated until 1913, when it was consolidated into the one in Belmont. This building, now the Heiser Rivers Museum, was where that post office operated for a short time. Its namesake, William Heiser, pioneer surgeon and Civil War captain, came to Plainfield Township in 1850 when it was a lumber center. In 1852, he built this Greek Revival house as a home and office for his medical and civic duties. He was at various times township clerk, school inspector and supervisor, and justice of the peace. The house has also served as a stagecoach station and a post office, as mentioned previously. In 1976, it was moved to its present site. The only remaining structure from the original Plainfield village, it is now restored as a museum. I mentioned Childsdale. On the 2017 atlas, it appears off of Childsdale Avenue, north of Barkley Creek, on the old railroad line that is now part of White Pine Linear State Park Trail. This 1907 map shows that H.H. Child's 284 acres of property comprising Childsdale, highlighted in green, abuts the southwest corner of Rockford. The village began with the building of a sawmill by Zenas G. Windsor in 1848 and was first named Gibraltar. H.B. Childs purchased the town and added the Childsdale paper mills in 1866. Its depot on the Grand Rapids and Indiana Railroad was renamed Childs Mill Station. The post office opened as Childsdale on September 15th, 1900, with Claire C.B. Cutts as its first postmaster. So a town that's had at least 4 names. 1907 village plat map identifies a store and office, engine lofts, paper mills, a barn, scales, mill pond, and of course the dam to hold it back. Nowadays, you wouldn't know when you were in Childsdale except for the name of the road. The railroad crossing through Childsdale is now another part of the White Pine Trail. We next visit Bowen Station, began on December 16th, 1870, with a post office and a depot on the Michigan Central Railroad. Frederick S. Clark served as the first postmaster. On September 18th, 1883, the post office was renamed Crosby. 1907 atlas shows Bowen Station still with a post office named Crosby. So when the office finally closed is not clear. Bowen Station has now been relegated to a Kentwood City Park, as seen in the September 2017 Google Street View. Since this photo, there have been some renovations and a new sign put up sometime between September 2017 and August 2019. Whether you call it Crosby or Bowen Station, the rail depot has been consumed by the city of Kentwood. The rail depot, that is, the rail depot of Bowen Station. We next visit Dutton. Dutton began as Hammond in 1870 on the farmland of Stephen Hammond, when the Grand River Valley Railroad came through and built a depot here, named Hammond Station. On January 27th, 1870, it was given a post office named Hammond, with George W. Woodward as its first postmaster. This 1876 map reflects the town's original namesake, its area landowners, highlighted in green and blue. Platted and recorded as Hammond for Mr. Hammond by Robert S. Jackson on December 29th, 1875, it was renamed Dutton for one of their officials after the Michigan Central Railroad took over the Grand River Valley Railroad. The post office was renamed Dutton on December 6, 1882, and continued operation until February 10th, 1966. The 1907 plat map shows a hotel, church, depot, and several other buildings. Of particular note is this building on the southwest corner of 68th Street and Hammond Avenue. It's the Dutton General Store, and it has stood here since 1871. Dutton also has this distinctive old building, but since I took this photo in 2017, I haven't been able to determine where it stands, or haven't been able to find it since then on any Google Street View. I wonder if it's been torn down or just hidden by bushes. With about 7 minutes to go, we can start our exploration of Cannon Township. I especially want to visit the town of Chauncey, which appears to be identified as Buena Vista on this 1873 map, but it is referring to Austerlitz, just across the border into Plainfield Township. This 1907 map identifies Chauncey as Imperial Mills, and the Bostic Lake Post Office has been moved north and renamed the Bostic Post Office. It actually, as I later found out, this one built in Chauncey was built to replace the one that burned down in Austerlitz in 1874. Regardless, this one has a sign, apparently a new one, that declares Imperial Mills to have been established in 1848. To the north, across the road from the mill, is this house, which used to serve as a stage stop and inn. The quiet rural community of Chauncey rests on the edge of metropolitan Grand Rapids, separated only by the Grand River. We have time to visit one more site, Steele's Corners. This 1876 map shows the property of Bostic Lake's first postmaster, Nathaniel Steele, highlighted in green, and other Steele family parcels highlighted in yellow and I guess you'd call that fuchsia. Around the site known as Steele's Corners, at the intersection of what today is M44 Belding Road and Tiffany Avenue. Satellite view shows our next stop is Cannonsburg. This 1876 map shows that Cannonsburg was already a boomtown. The first settler was Andrew Watson in 1837. The town was established in 1844 with the separation of Cannon Township from Plainfield Township. It was named for LeGrand Cannon, a New York financier, who through his agent E.B. Bostwick, you recognize that name, bought land here, had the village platted in 1848 and gave away 25 lots to create the village. The post office opened as Cannonsburg with an H on the end on May 7th, 1844, with Sidney S. Haskins as its first postmaster. Post office closed on August 19th, 1847, and reopened on September 22nd, 1847. The spelling was changed to Cannonsburg without the H on February 5th, 1894. Although a thriving community today, Cannonsburg was in crisis in the 1970s. The town was run down, the drug use was common in the streets. That all changed when Don Kurilovich rebuilt the town of Cannonsburg. A 2009 article posted at mlive.com provides a history of Don's intervention and renovation from the Honey Creek Inn in 1984 to the Grist Mill grocery store and gas station in 1997, where Ralph the Moose, a 600-pound cast alloy behemoth, stands at attention. There's Don sitting on Ralph's back, circa 2009. The locals thought he was crazy when in 1982 he proposed to restore the buildings in downtown Cannonsburg. Don recalls that on the day he reopened the Honey Creek Inn, he confronted a couple of guys in the parking lot snorting cocaine off the hood of their car. "You can't do that here anymore," he told them as he shooed them off the property. "There's a new sheriff in town." Don hired Mark McKenzie to paint the Honey Creek Inn. Mark countered with a proposal to paint every building in town. Don agreed to his terms and Mark went to work. Did an amazing job, as these Google images prove. So this building, which served as the Cannon Township Hall from 1890 until 1987, is now the Cannon Historical Museum. We next go to Whitneyville. Do we want to continue at this point? I hear no protests. We shall continue on until somebody interrupts me, I guess.
Keep going.
Whitneyville. All right. Whitneyville was named for Peter Whitney of Ohio, who in 1841 moved with his family onto this site. We actually have only 21 slides left. We can get through this. Post office was established on February 18th, 1849, with William C. White as its first postmaster. The post office closed on August 27th, 1868, but reopened from October 23rd, 1877 until July 31st, 1909. Whether Whitneyville is a ghost town is debatable. As it exists today, it's not much different than it was 150 years ago. The railroad still runs through it, or rather over it. This underpass barely passable for anything taller than 10 feet, barring big trucks. To be fair, there's another railroad crossing for those big trucks. Whitneyville has the old-time Methodist church, West Michigan Hindu temple, and the Whitneyville Fellowship Church, and the Lakeside Community Church. Seems Whitneyville is now a town of churches and pretty much nothing else. When I went to Google to find the business district or anything else besides houses and churches, I found this, a 57 Chevy cruising down Whitneyville Road. How cool is that? Well, I didn't find a downtown Whitneyville. I did find this estate on the west side of Whitneyville Road. So Whitneyville no longer has a downtown, but they certainly are uptown. I almost forgot to mention Whitney Tavern Stand, 5283 Whitneyville Avenue, an Alto address. Alto happens to be in Ionia County. By the way, are still active. CSX owns it. The old town hall is now somebody's home. And then there's this odd stack of farm animals, a chicken on top of a pig on top of a cow. As sleepy old towns go, McCord is among the sleepiest. And that takes us to the end of the presentation. I wish I could hear you all applauding. I guess we're going to open up the mic for comments and questions. I don't know how you're going to do
Yeah.
that, but it's at your end.
You can use the reactions at the bottom if you'd like for clapping. And if you have questions or comments, you can add them to our chat. And while people are typing those, Dana, I wanted to say, wow, thank you so much. Great images, absolutely wonderful images.
Well, thank you. I hope everyone else thinks so too.
And thank you for letting us drive around with you. This was, you're the guy who really knows Kent County and where all the different burgs are. What fun.
I've been studying.
Finally, we will close with next month's program will be on May the 12th. And it will be called Steeplechase Part 2, west side of the Grand River, and that will be on the churches of the west side. And Caroline Cook will be presenting that. Thank you again. I appreciate everyone joining us tonight, and have a good evening. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. And if you like what I did tonight, tell the library or the Historical Society to call me back for more.
Bye all. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.